This episode is sponsored by Cocatel Collective, a strategic sales and marketing agency representing a highly curated portfolio of emerging beverage brands, from premium all-natural sodas, wine spritzes, and spirits all around the world.
Welcome to the In Process podcast, where we share stories of resilience and passion. We're excited that you found our YouTube channel, and we'd love to hear from you. So be sure to comment below and hit that like button. If you're enjoying these stories, be sure to subscribe and share. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to this episode of In Process. I'm Mary.
And I'm Anjoleen. As always, big shout out to Atmosphere and the Rhymesayers crew for sharing their music with our show.
And today we are excited to introduce LORRAINE Nguyên. She worked at a plethora of incredible Chicago restaurants, including Publican, Blackbird, and Sepia for 17 years before becoming the culinary program manager for Impact at the Hatchery, Chicago. Everyone, please welcome to the show, LORRAINE.
Yay! Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I'm so excited to meet you. So I was thinking about this last night, and I don't know why. I was just thinking about like my childhood and who I used to be and how that like relates to me now. So I'm curious about your upbringing.
Sure. So I am I would call myself like 1.5 generation, really, if you were to ask my mom. But I am the first American-born person in my family. My family is Vietnamese. My parents came here in 1986 as refugees from the war. And I had a really, I think, standard Viet American upbringing in San Jose, California. I was, born there. I spent, I would say, like almost 9 years there before I relocated to the Midwest. And for me, our family had the very classic, almost like immigrant story where we shared a house with like 5 bedrooms and there were at least 12 people living there at all times. Like my grandma and aunts really invested time in building a garden that, they could grow different herbs that we use. And it was really highlighted to me that though people were busy, they will always gather around for dinner, specifically if it's like a Sunday dinner. So those experiences were really formative for me as a young person trying to understand my family as people who were Vietnamese coming to America and experiencing American culture for the first time, and as a young person who was growing up pretty immersed in American culture, right? It always felt like a really heavy separation of like, at home, we're just really Viet. Like we speak Viet, we, eat Vietnamese food, but then I'm going out in the world and it's like we're speaking English, we're like eating really westernized foods, like even, being younger, I'm sure a lot of people have this story, but it's when you would eat the food from like your motherland, people would look at you really weird. So now you're eating Lunchables and ham sandwiches and bologna sandwiches and just
The
kind of
classic lunchbox.
the classic lunchbox, conundrum, right? So for me, having those experiences and being really cognizant and almost always feeling this otherness for a very long time really shaped how I went on to look at my place in the world and the kind of food that I like to eat and create.
Would you say, I'm just curious because you said you were about 9 when you moved. Like I think of the Bay Area as being so much diversity compared to the Midwest.
Yeah.
Did you move to the Chicagoland area and was there a big shift then?
Oh man, I wish it was just straight to Chicagoland. I get so envious of anybody who tells me they grew up like in Chicago, like going to school like in Chicago when they were younger. We were living in San Jose, which is really Viet dense, right? I think it's like for the northern end of California, that's like Little Saigon. Like you have like Orange County, which is like on the southern end, Little Saigon, but on the north side, it's San Jose. So we moved from there to St. Louis, Missouri.
Why?
It's so stark. It was the reason why we moved to there is my parents actually had friends who they met when they were in those different like quote unquote like internment camps, right? People they met when they were in Thailand or the Philippines when they were getting ready to immigrate to America. And during the 80s, there was a large portion of Catholic churches that sponsored refugees. So you saw a lot of people come there. So my parents were like, you know, just for a couple of reasons, we're like, we need a change of scenery. We moved there. I remember like flying there. It was on my birthday. I had to leave my whole friends and family and life on my 9th birthday.
Oh, no.
We landed in St. Louis, and like a month later was the first time I ever saw snow. And that was really crazy. I think climate-wise, going from
Yeah.
like California to like St. Louis, it just, you know, look at all these seasons. And everything was so much more spread out. Like if you wanted to go get food, you had to go to a specific area where they had the international market and where they had like other, you know, like other Asian adjacent cuisines. In San Jose, it's like you go around the corner to a strip mall and there's like 15
Oh, wow.
restaurants or grocery
100%.
stores.
Yeah.
Right? There's no lack of that. And also being cognizant of like, for many situations from the time I was 9 until I ultimately left St. Louis when I was 17, I was the only Asian person in a lot of spaces, whether that was school or work, and definitely the only Viet person. So that was really hard for me to go from a place where, you know, it was in California, it's like really high Asian, Southeast Asian, like South Asian, right? Like Pacific Islander, Latin, as well as like different demographics. I remember in a lot of classes, they were like, we had a large concentration of like Ethiopian classmates. To go from that, and then you're just dropped in St. Louis, where you're the only person in all these spaces that look like you. It's very challenging.
I'm from Minneapolis.
Okay.
I grew up in Minneapolis,
Nice.
and I just went home for Christmas for like 72 hours. But
Yeah.
one of the things I noticed, I'm adopted, so my mom's white,
Mm-hmm.
but I kept pointing out, and I don't think I could have named it before I moved to Chicago, but having been here for now more than a year, I was like, Mom, this is like the third place today that the pharmacy, I was the only person of color. Like everyone is white. This restaurant, I'm the only person who's not
Yeah.
white. And it's like, even today, it's it's wild.
It's like really noticeable. I think when you're an adult and you're able to process that, you look back and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
I wasn't just being overly like self-conscious,
Yeah.
right? There's a reason why I always felt this feeling of othered, or like that I didn't belong, or that I had to be really mindful of how I conducted myself, because those are predominantly white spaces. And whether I could name it or not, or you could name it or not, you knew.
Was that, the family that you were with in San Jose, did they also move with you?
No, so we are the only sector of our family that lives in, so predominantly most of my family, this is my mom's side, right? Everybody in my immediate family from my mom's side is in San Jose. But that was like, you know, grandma down to the youngest aunts. I have some family in actually Minneapolis. They've been there for as long as I can remember. And then we are the only ones that are like in the Midwest outside of that Minneapolis family. My mom is still in St. Louis to this day. My brother was there. He just moved to Colorado for like an amazing school opportunity. And then I'm in Chicago. But nobody else is like further east. I'm the furthest east in the entire United States.
Did you, when they were planting the gardens and like taking care of it, were you mindful of it? Was it kind of like in the back of your head?
I think it was in the back of my head because I was so used to seeing it.
Yeah.
Right? You're used to seeing these like different, it's like a milk gallon that's been used, but now we use it as like, you know, a
Yes.
planter, as like a jug for watering. So we're like tying them up. We're doing all these things. So that didn't occur to me, this abundance that we had.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like I had aunts and uncles that are really to this day really serious about like planting fruit trees and like herbs. So for me, I was like, yeah, that's what our backyard looks like. And then you go to like St. Louis and you're like, okay, holy shit, that's not what anybody's backyards
Yeah.
look like. So yeah, I hope I answered that.
Yeah,
question.
no, you did. I asked that because I grew up when I first was growing up, I lived in a village there was a lot of buildings and houses. And then I moved to another village that I lived in a ranch. And my mom's like new husband, he had like pigs and chickens, and we had iguanas, and we started raising like tilapia. And so I was like very embarrassed in high school because the school that I was going to, like everybody was rich. And I
Yeah.
just remember them being like, oh, when are we going to go to your house? And I was like, never. Like, why would we
Never.
ever go there? And it was just something that I was like really ashamed of. And I remember I would like have to feed the chickens, or I would have to like take the pig slop and like feed the pigs. And I was just like, oh, I hate this. And then now like looking back on it, I'm like, that has like taught me so much about like discipline, and also just opened my eyes to like just a different world. And it's something that I like really proudly tell people. So I just think it's interesting that we like put these ideas in our own head. And then when you move on, you're like, wow, that was something that I needed that I didn't even realize.
It's also the difference, I think, between like adult Anjoleen and
Yeah.
teenage Anjoleen. And just like as a kid, I think you have all these feelings that maybe you can't describe. And so whether it's embarrassment or shame or different things, sometimes you don't know how to describe that. But then later in life, you realize like how necessary some of those things were. Or it's like maybe gardens have re-entered your life and it was all started way back when you were a kid,
Yeah.
things like that. Like it's the things that like bring back that nostalgia and yeah.
Yeah, I think I also relate to that feeling of embarrassment where when I was younger, you would get like invited to people's birthday parties and I would go over to their spaces. And I saw how much our space didn't look like their spaces, right? Again, where it's like our house is like saturated with people, like there's no confusing that it is a house that like lots of Vietnamese people live in. There's like Vietnamese calendars and posters and all this stuff, and understanding that, I was just scared to invite people over. That was something I still kind of hang on to, because I'm like, oh, it doesn't look like your house. Like, you're going to know we're different. Like, people are going to walk around you and, offer you food that's different, and you're going to hear our accents. That was something I was really, really sensitive about when I was younger. Like, I don't know if y'all have experienced that, but being a kid and, like, when your mom would come pick you up, or they would hear somebody in your family pick you up, and they would, like, point out the fact that they had an accent, even though those people were, like, learning English and putting so much into it. I was like, oh, I was afraid they were going to make fun of us if they came over.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like, there's a lot of like shame growing up, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
It's interesting because like my perspective, I grew up in this white household, so I actually had shame the opposite way. So I never wanted Asians to come over because at least the Koreans that I had met, everything was so pristine. Like their mom vacuumed every single day, and so like I'd be like, oh, my parents don't take their shoes off, and I'd be so ashamed. Like just the looks that like Asians like with cleanliness. Like I feel like it's so interesting that maybe shame is just a feeling a lot of you just have as a kid because
Universal.
you're worried about being this other or not the norm of what you're seeing around you or what you want to be, maybe even
what
a
you
little
want to
bit.
be.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like that does make a lot of sense.
No, it's actually, I feel weird saying it because it's a very specific demographic, but there are a lot of things that are just done differently culturally, and it's like those differences aren't bad, but when you, as a kid, I think you internalize a lot of those things too. It feels bad.
And other kids are pretty relentless, right? Like as an adult, you can be like, hey, this is just how it is at your house because it is, right? That's who you are. That's what you determine is fine. But other kids would laugh. They'd be like, you don't do that, loser. Like that's what a terrible feeling to get from other people.
Right. I used to tell people, like people used to joke that there was body parts in my refrigerator because they would see the kimchi jars. Yeah.
You're like, there's bones,
But I
and
would,
they're
I would
delicious.
just come back at that. I was like, oh.
Like, you don't know what good food is, so no, sorry.
You'll regret this in 15 years.
You will.
Mock my words.
You'll be wanting this kimchi.
Yeah.
So then moving to the Chicagoland area, did you move to Chicago proper at 17?
I did. I graduated high school in probably July or August of 2007, and I was living in Chicago by September. I moved here to go to culinary school because I felt like, I needed to get out of St. Louis. And to be honest, it was like when I was thinking of major cities, I was like, okay, California, like you can go to San Jose or LA, you can go to New York, or you can go to Chicago. I always figured I would be back in California and I can always go back, which holds true to this day. New York is, I think, like every young person's like, I gotta get out of this tiny town, man, screw this town. But then I was like, holy shit, actually, I'm too scared to do that. I in hindsight, I'm kind of glad I didn't do that because I think I would have probably crashed and burned a little bit.
Right.
But then I decided on Chicago. I visited and I thought like the feel of the city is great. And for me, I had worked in restaurants prior. I would say I've had culinary experience my first job was I was 15 at a Burger King, right? And then I moved on. Yeah, it was great. I loved it. It was such like a weird job though, and the management was so creepy.
Yeah.
So I quit within 2 weeks, and I was working as actually like a busser at a mom and pop Italian restaurant, which is where I worked for like 3 years. I really liked it.
Oh wow.
It gave me my first taste of an actual functioning restaurant, and it taught me that I really did not want to pretend to like and be nice to people all the time.
Man, I wish I learned that a lot earlier. I just learned that like last year.
Listen, even as someone now who like deals with a lot of people, sometimes I'm like, oh, my limit.
We're so close.
We're so close, but I always really liked hiding in the back and watching the cooks. At that point, they were all like these like white male cooks too. I loved watching the guys like put food together, and like during service when you're just getting like that rush and things are compacted.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just so fucking cool to watch that orchestra.
Crush.
Yeah, like everybody just is making it happen and they're all in sync. And for me, I was like, oh, I like making food. I should make food as a career.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do I do that? I don't think that, you know, I want to train with these guys. So I was like, I'll go to culinary school. That should make me legitimate, right?
Exactly.
I love that you shared that story because I was just talking about that too. We were talking about some of my past experiences in restaurants, and I was sitting here with one of my wine reps. His name is Jason Limjoko. Jason, if you're listening, shout out to Jason. I was 19 years old working at Let Us Entertain You in a restaurant up in the North Shore. And Jason Limjoko, who is still I work with today, 21 years later, he was my manager there. And I was telling him and Andy about my time working under Jason. And I remember the GM at the time was like he's tall stature, very like, intimidating GM. And I was just sharing with Jason how much during that time, this was my first like real front of house, like you said, real full restaurant experience, right? Coming from like a country club restaurant, right? And like going into like a Lettuce, I was like, holy shit. And every time I was like in the kitchen waiting for my food for my tables, I was like, could not take my eyes off the line and seeing the orchestra of chaos, and all of a sudden, boom, a plate of food comes up.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with that. And that's why I went to work in the back of house after I got fired in the front. But yeah, I went and learned the back of house and worked in the line for a year. And but that was the same sentiment that I had experienced. And I was like, I was there with you when you were sharing that story. I was like, yes. Oh yeah.
That's like one of my defining moments where I was like, oh, front of house is kind of cool. And like, being 17 at the time, like the money was great, right? You get tipped out and you're like, oh, I have money for gas and Taco Bell tonight. Like, this is a good night.
Oh, yeah.
But then all the other layers that goes into hospitality was not something that I could tolerate at that time. I think as I've gotten older, I've been able to tolerate a lot more because I know how to manage myself and deal with people.
Ooh, that's
but
a
when
big
you're
one.
younger,
you
I'm
said
like,
that. That is,
why
yeah.
did you look at me like that? Why did you say it like that? You're being weird. I'm like, I hate you. That's very like teenage angst.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now, I appreciate the picture that front of the house and holds together for a restaurant too.
Yeah, that's
Love that.
yeah. I do love that you said managing myself, because I think that it's something that we don't talk about a lot, but there's a lot of like emotional stress that happens in the industry, not only like physically taxing, but emotionally.
Yeah.
Like even the other day I was like not in the mood to work, but no one's gonna know. So I'm like on the floor, just so happy. And it's just so interesting to me because I'm like, wow, like I wouldn't put my day on another person's experience, but it happens, But yeah, you have to be super self-aware and take accountability for that role that you're playing in the restaurant,
Yeah. I love that.
or just like crush in the back, because I was always scared of back of house. They're just like, I don't know why. I like never, always admired it, but I was never like, I'm going back there because I was just always scared.
I love the idea that like every back of house employee should experience like a stage shift in the
Both,
front,
yeah.
Yeah.
and then a back of house or front of house teammate staging in the back. You know, I feel like my experience working the line gave me such a deep appreciation for, you know, what goes on back there, and the respect I had when I started leading a team in the front of house. I really stood for everybody in the back, right? I really stood for like understanding, like, hey, there's two sides to this. Your job is hard too, but so is theirs, you know.
Yeah.
So
It's important, I think, for a long time too.
that's that. Don't worry about that.
What? I don't hear anything.
I thought I was like imagining that.
Something ringing. Like,
My brain is ringing. You guys.
hello, answer. Hello.
No, go to voicemail.
It's the kitchen burner.
Oh no! I think for a long time too, it was really glorified in the way that we were. I think the way that restaurant spaces were run, it was very divided,
Yeah.
right? And it's just like this contest of who suffers more. Or it's
yeah.
like, you know, like if we're going off back of the house, it's like it's hot back here, it's stressful, like we're moving at this pace, we don't stop, like we really don't get time to take care of ourselves because we're worrying about making this food for you guys.
Yeah.
And then front of the house is like, hey, I have this person asking me to do all these things that we cannot do. They're in a bad mood. They didn't communicate to me. Now I have to go tell you I need something. Like, you know, you're right. Everybody plays a really important part. And we forget that emotional labor goes in multiple directions, right? It's easy to think about, I think, emotional labor when we talk about front of the house, because it's like you are putting on the face and looking at another person. But, you know, the back still does that. And, you know, it's like, yeah, the back you get busy. But if you're busy, that means the entire restaurant is fucking sat.
Right.
Like there are people running around making sure those people are happy, you know?
I love that.
I love that. So flash forward?
Fast forward.
Flash forward. Sounds cooler. Barry Allen. Okay, so professional journey. Do you have any like key experiences from where you've worked in Chicago that you think that you still take with you?
Yeah. My first real anchored full-time cook job in Chicago was at the Publican. And I found that to be, as a young cook who had a very limited palate and limited understanding of different types of restaurants, that was one of the most formative experiences I could have. I saw ingredients that I had never known existed. I tasted things that I had never known existed or that I thought I would like. Having farmers come to the back door daily with like a whole hog or their favorite little radishes that they've picked especially for you, thinking you would like them, and being able to see that through is an incredible feeling. It gave me so much more respect for the food system and really ingrained in me that whatever I did, I wanted to hold that respect. Also, it taught me how to line cook. When you are doing 400 covers a night on average, you will learn to get on board or not. It really taught me I could multitask. Like, you know, my first position there, I worked the oyster station. I don't know if you guys have been to the Publican, but the oyster station from like 2 p.m. when the bar opens until last table, nonstop. You are in the weeds the entire night.
Oh my God.
But it taught me to move faster, and I put a lot of pride into not only moving fast, but being really accurate and moving fast. And then when I moved on to like Garmo and then like, you know, onto the hotline, it really like ignited an animal in me that I didn't know I had, which was competitiveness.
Can you dive a little deeper into
Yeah.
that? Like for people that never cooked in a
Sure.
restaurant before, can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So for me, it showed up because of two different things. One was understanding that I was one of few femmes on the line, and that there were a lot of men around me who had way more experience. So I wanted to not just keep up with them, I wanted to be as good as them. So I'm like, how do I become better than you? So it taught me to watch people and critically think. And I'm like, okay, if I think what I'm doing is better, find the best person in the room, how do they do it, and do it that way.
I love that.
That taught me that huge skill. Another thing is, it's like when you are in the middle of service in a space like that, where it's very much like publican is as the food comes out, right? So other restaurants, you get timing, you get the support of your team to be like, hey, we're up at this time. At publican, it is just go until it's out. Jeez. So when you are a person standing there, for example, if you have 8 dishes on your station and there are 9 of them on fire at any given time, you have to produce 56 items. And I always liked the idea of visualizing something that was so stacked against me. I am one person moving quickly, trying to make almost 60 things. And I would just be thrilled when I would like clear that board. It just felt like, because the more you're cooking, the more they're calling in, but can you keep up? And it's like this like higher than doggy paddling. It's just like you're fighting these currents. Yeah. And for me, I would feel so fucking accomplished and so good knowing that I could do that and watching myself do it.
I love that.
Yeah. I think my math was wrong, by the way. Now that I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't think that's right. But anywho.
Yeah. Publican at the time, for anyone that's listening, like, I don't know who doesn't know this restaurant by now, but I mean, at that time, it's one of those, like, I don't say staple. I feel like it's like one of the like epitome restaurants of Chicago at the time. Yeah. Like it is, incredible.
Yeah. So that really gave me my chops.
I also love that you mentioned about learning the respect for the food. I feel like it's just something that is such a formative, like it's a change in a cook's understanding of what their role is, right? Yeah. And I learned that from an incredible chef I used to work for, Jason Alford, who was like, my job is to not fuck up the hard work that was put into the produce and meats that are coming into my back door. Like, and I just absolutely love that you really dived into that in that experience. So
thanks. It made me kind of reflect on like, when you needed mint, when we were having dinner when we were younger, you needed mint. You went outside and picked the mint. Okay, mint doesn't show up. Like somebody put the seeds in the ground and watered it and made sure that it didn't dry up when there was like, hotter days and that we could have what we needed. So it's the same sentiment, right? I think you go to the grocery store now, it's really easy, specifically in American grocery store culture and food culture, to be disconnected from your food.
Right.
Like, it's like,
there's no face behind it, right? But when you're meeting when you're meeting like Slagle, or you're meeting like Werp's Farm, like the family literally drives through Chicago in the wee hours of the night.
Absolutely.
And I've been at the restaurant working like 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, hi, how you doing? Yeah. It's like the daughter like driving the produce around.
And the way that they even carry themselves and like handle the food is so like delicate and cared for, as opposed to a delivery guy who's dropping off like a box
truck,
of, they're just like, and you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah, just have this. And I love hearing about like different varietals. It's like, this is an heirloom squash and this is like so-and-so squash. It's really fun, right? And I think it's important to remember that food just doesn't show up. And like what you said, to not fuck it up. Yeah. Like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, you forgot about a bunch of carrots and they burn. Okay, they're just carrots. But no, like, think about how long it took for them to sprout those seedlings. Think about all of the steps that those farmers had to go to ensure that carrot, that adorable carrot, showed up to your door.
Right.
Think about weather. Think about, like, I don't know, cicadas. Think about not having enough hands. Think about all this stuff.
Right.
So that this beautiful carrot can just be roasted and you can eat it with a little bit of oil and salt, and it's like the most delicious thing you've ever had.
And the difference I also like to point out is that sometimes is in the back of house, you don't get to see that carrot was like the favorite bite of this 1-2 top that was like celebrating an anniversary, and they haven't been out for dinner in months because they've been busy. And like, they're like, God, that fucking carrot was so fucking good.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's where another disconnect happens, right? So it's just like cool to hear it through and, and kind of like put it out there for people to understand.
Well, and it shows how much personal, like human connection there is with this one carrot. Like how many people have loved this little carrot
How many
all
people
the way
have
through
loved
from
it?
from the farmer to the person.
I
eating
see
it.
the carrot.
Yeah, no, I
It's
can see the
cute.
carrot.
This episode is
traveling.
sponsored by
If
carrots.
if you would like to donate adorable baby carrots to us, hit up
I mean, there's so much love from the farmer. We've talked about the farmer, and the cook has to is cooked like in the preparation, and then also from the and just all the people who have. It's the village. It takes a village.
It
to-
takes a
is.
village.
For the
And I
carrot.
think that's like very, again, like normal in pretty much every other culture to be like, it's a village, that takes care of children, that takes care of vegetables. So we all have what we need. And I think something too that Paul Kahn actually once mentioned in a pre-shift, he was like, if you can show respect to something as little as, I think it was like maybe a radish or maybe it's the carrot, right? If you put that much like mindfulness into just taking care of this one simple thing, then you will be able to transfer that mindfulness into how you move, how you butcher, how you think about plates. So it's like a practice in mindfulness.
I love that.
Yeah.
I also love that you. How old were you when you worked at the Publican?
I was 19.
Oh my
I
God.
You
just
Badass.
barely 19.
I
I
knew it.
was in school full time, working at the Publican full time.
wow.
That hurt. And I ultimately ended up dropping out of school because when you're closing out a restaurant, then you have 6 a.m. class.
Yeah.
And you're not like Ubering, you're not driving, you're taking like the red line every day.
Oh,
It's really hard to stay focused.
Yeah. But even you're at 19, your mindset of being so aware of like you know what I mean? Just like being so, I don't
For
know,
sure.
in it and aware of like watching and observing and wanting to do better. I think that I wasn't like that. So I know I'm like, that's terrible, but it's such a beautiful moment for you to be able to go into a job so quickly. And I think when I was young, I think this is for a lot of people. It's like, what can the job do for me, right? I'm gonna do my
Yeah.
work, but what are they gonna give me? And it's money, right? It's a paycheck,
it's money.
but like what this book that I'm reading right now, it talks about how you should work for lessons. You should work to learn. So you don't choose your job based on like the money or the paycheck. You choose it on how much can I gain from working there and learning from everybody. And I just think that that's the way to live. Otherwise, what are you really doing,
Right. Like, how do you even enjoy being there? How do you enjoy being the person that you become,
Yeah.
through that experience? But, don't get me wrong. Like, tons of other things in my life suffered. And if you were to ask anybody who worked with me at that time, they would be like, yes, she was like a young bratty bonehead. Like, now I can reflect. Now I can deeply reflect and be like, oh, these things are really, really important. But at the time, I was still acting like a 19-year-old. So I just wanted to be
You're
transparent.
like, I'm
about-
not perfect. I'm like, you're perfect.
No, I wasn't just like so serious. I was like, I would, yeah.
So when did you begin entrepreneurship?
That's a really good question. Okay, so I always had side hustles whenever I worked in any restaurant. Sometimes they would be culinary based, sometimes they would not. It's hard when I had my time in fine dining, it was very hard to find time to do that when you're already committed to some place for like 60, 70 hours a week. My main lean into entrepreneurship started happening closer to 2018 or 2019, because I was understanding that the fine dining lifestyle as it was not working for me and that I needed to think of other outlets. I also began to find it difficult to feel like I was always creating for other people, right? So even if you work on a really great team in a really great restaurant and you make a dish, that dish belongs to the house,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's like, I think now that's changed because you go places and you see menus and it's like it lists all the chefs and all the cooks.
Right.
And I love that because it does take so many people to give that experience, and you don't just make one great dish on your own, right? It takes people to like do the checks and balances to make it great with
Right.
you. For me, the big jump was in 2020. I was in a pretty gnarly accident at the end of 2019 that really turned my world upside down and really challenged my physical abilities. Like I was, I developed a disability because of it. And for me, coupled with that, well, like the disability coupled with how unsupported I had felt from different people I worked with when lockdown happened, and just doing a little bit of unlearning of like, whoa, when I was at this place, I was just a piece in the machine. I have nothing to, I almost have nothing to show for it, right? I don't have any sort of financial security. I don't have any like support. Sometimes they were not even that nice to me. I got to say I worked at a nice restaurant, put on my resume, which helped other people hire me. But, my relationships failed, my health, not great. What do I actually have to show for that? And so I decided, I was like, I don't really want to always work for other people. And I need to try to believe in my own vision, because it's easy to hide behind a restaurant and be like, oh, I work at this place, so I'm clearly like a great cook or great chef. But I wanted to challenge that and be like, could I create on my own? Would people still support me? Can I do it? Or am I just this person who hides behind a restaurant? So with that, out of necessity, really, because I wasn't able to get unemployment benefits, I started my micro bakery, Gansa, where I made desserts, pastries that I wanted to eat. And that was one of my first adventures into baking and pastry. It's,
Oh, so you were always in savory.
I was always in savory. I always had an interest in incorporating like pastry techniques into dishes. Like say maybe, a dish that was really leaning meat heavy. I'm like, oh, there's like this puree, but what if we found a way to, work chocolate into it or
Right.
work caramel into it? Like not super groundbreaking stuff, but exciting for a person who had not seen that before.
Yeah.
Different techniques. I'm like, okay, instead of us doing this, like, is there a way that we can incorporate a specific type of, clarified like fruit consomme or gel into something? So that always interested me.
Yeah.
I think the art of baking pastry and the science is just, it blows my mind continuously.
Very cool.
Right. So for me, I was like, understanding, I'm like, what can one person do? I did some meal kits for people. I, started taking on like private chef work for some clients I had in the past. I, did nearly ready to eat meal kits for folks as a way to support myself. And then I was like, I'm going to try my hand at baking because I have all this time now. I might as well do something with my brain.
Yeah.
So I really leaned into that, and that opened up the doors for me to work with other entrepreneurs. I got to collaborate with a lot of people. I worked in a couple of different collaboratives. That also opened up the door for me to be a vendor at 4-Letter Word Coffee. Which is like one of my favorite
cool.
Are
coffee
you
shops.
still
I've
at
been there.
4-Letter
Yeah,
Word?
yeah.
I ended my stint about a year ago when I started this job.
Okay.
But I was at 4-Letter Word for almost a year. I met some incredible bakers. I participated in like, lots of community-driven mutual aid events. I did a lot of like special, one-off like baker's box stuff. Ria is an incredible person.
Did you do Baker's Box when I came to Chicago with Arnold Bien?
I did not.
Okay.
I didn't get invited to that.
Sorry. No. When you said Baker's Box specifically, I was like, wait. Okay, never mind.
I want to know where the word kansa comes from.
Yeah, so it would formally be the Viet word for cannabis.
Oh. Like the street term, or like Koreans call it, like we have mayak, which is drug, but then we call it dal,
Oh, really?
which is herb,
Oh,
like
yeah.
not, it doesn't, I don't think it means herb, but like that's what we call.
I think the street term would be much more eloquent. I don't know what the street term is.
This is like the formal term.
Cannabis, yeah.
Oh, wow.
like,
There's a real word for it.
there's a real word for it, yeah. So
It's interesting.
for me, okay, so this is a portion where I'm like, I don't know what you guys want to use from this.
Everything.
All of
Okay,
it.
so predominantly hold on, let me think about the legalities of this. So what I want to say is that when I started Kansa, it was like,
Yeah.
but I also don't know what the legalities of that would be if I said that.
Right.
So I'm going to say infused. I'll say CBD infused.
Yeah, there you go.
So when I started Kansa Bakery, it was predominantly CBD infused pastries because, again, I had seen, in my limited exposure to any sort of like plant medicine in Chicago, right? You can get cookies, you can get like gummies. There are some really incredible underground people who do awesome stuff. But I would also have an idea for something. I'm like, ooh, I want like a bun with smoked salmon and like gochujang cream cheese.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also want to feel
Feel
good
good.
after I eat it. Where can I get
Yes.
that? I'm like, I can't get it. I'm going to make it.
I love that.
I'm like, ooh, I want like a Thai tea snickerdoodle, but I also want it to be fun. How can I get that? I make it. So that's kind of like how I think about things. But yeah, it was cool.
Is that still operating?
It operates on an incredibly limited commission
Okay.
base.
Gotcha.
Mostly due to my schedule. I don't have the time to do that. Every once in a while I have like a repeat client who's like, hey, can you make me like a chocolate cake? It's my wife's birthday. And I'm like, of course I can. But for the most part, I really do juggle a lot with the program, my students' needs, and then the other pop-ups that I continually still do. I do about one a month on average.
Oh my gosh.
That's
Yeah,
lot.
it's a lot. When I'm smart, I do one a month. Sometimes I'm not smart, and I'll do
Yeah.
like 3 in 1 week, which is just not. It always works out, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So are there other ventures within entrepreneurship that you're focusing more on besides Kansa then?
Not really. I used to want to have like the supper club. I think everybody loves the idea of like an underground supper club. And it is something that I still work out occasionally. I'll always do it in a collaborative format because I think it's more fun to cook with friends. So I've done those, but it is a commitment. Like to build a restaurant out of thin air essentially is a lot of work.
in case anybody didn't know.
I know it looks really glamorous. People are like, oh, I just want this private chef to show up and like cook for me in this space. But I'm like, wow, you have no plateware. You have no,
Yeah.
you have no pans.
Oh, you need stuff.
Is this a professional kitchen? Like, what are you?
Exactly. I'm like, why is there only 2 burners and they're both like really low? What's happening?
Yeah. They're like electric burners or something.
Yeah. So for me, I kind of tapered that entrepreneurship dream. Anything could happen in the future, right? But for me, for the kind of thing I'm focusing on now is helping other people understand their potential as entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
love that.
let's get into that.
Let's go.
So tell us more about Impact Culinary and what you're doing over there.
Gladly. So Impact Culinary is a no-cost professional training program. It was funded by Rick Bayless in 2018 and had its first cohort in 2019.
Wow.
So what we do is we offer young adults, predominantly from the west and south sides of Chicago, to free culinary education. And our class is quite rigorous. Each cohort runs about 12 weeks. Students have on-campus training for the first 8 weeks. So they're learning everything from fundamentals, right? Like safe food handling to safety sanitation, how to hold a knife for the first time, how to, write prep lists, how to organize their day, how to work in teams, all the stuff that I think when you are a person who has been able to jump into restaurant spaces, you don't think about because someone else has thought about it for you. You just have to adapt it, right? They're like, this is what we do. We come in, we set up our cutting boards, we start our prep list, we go.
Yeah.
But if you've never seen anything like that before, it can be really daunting.
Right.
So we teach them that, coupled with professional development and job readiness training, which is part of what I do. I teach young adults core skills like communication, learning, conflict resolution, customer service. We dabble a lot in like emotional intelligence as well, because I think it's really important just for young people to have. Yeah. But my goal is to help you get all those skills, learn how to put together a resume, and learn how to not just interview, but talk about yourself in an empowered way and tell your story. So I'm going to go backwards now. The second portion of our program, students go off on a 4-week paid internship where we pair them up, between myself, Matt Miller, my culinary instructor, as well as Chef Kelly Dull, our culinary assistant. We've all worked in Chicago and in an industry for a while, so we have probably at least 60 years of cumulative experience, which means we also have a lot of friends in different restaurants who we came up with and we support, and we're like, hey, this is a person who's really carving out their own place in this community. I see and appreciate what they're trying to do for the culture and their investment in people coming through their spaces. So we pair our students up with internship there. And then, time to fly, baby.
Love that.
So
Off,
amazing.
little bird.
Let's go.
So amazing. I was curious, how big are the cohorts? And are you meeting with students one-on-one to be able to practice interviews and
Yeah.
things like that?
Great questions. So we hold 3 cohorts a year. On average, each cohort has between 16 to 20 students, which is, not in a grand scheme of things. You're like, oh, it's 15, 20 students. But my team is also myself, Chef Matt, and Chef Kelly, right?
Yeah.
So that's already a lot. As far as what we're able to give our students, they do get a lot of supports from us, different wraparound supports to help remove some barriers that they may encounter. Something as simple as transit and making sure somebody has their uniform paid for, right? It's hard to focus when you feel like you don't have the right uniform because you can't afford it. I think
basic
we've all
needs.
been in spaces like that. So a lot of that stuff we help take care of, as well as, we do a lot of individualized self-assessments. Bi-weekly, we sit down with every single student to have an assessment, and we ask them, I'm like, hey, what did you learn last 2 weeks? Physical skill. What did you learn, the last 2 weeks that was an essential skill? Tell me about your goals. What do you want to do? Where do you see yourself? What do you want to do with these skills? That gives us a chance to not only build trust with the person, they get to know us, but like I tell them, the more I know about what it is that you want, the better I can connect you to those opportunities. We, those are not our only times where we sit down with people. They're welcome to meet with us before class, after class. The chefs hold workshops for people who feel like they want to get more practice in. Today and tomorrow, actually, we are doing mock interviews with our students. So
cool.
they've been building resumes for the past 4.5 weeks. We've been priming them on different behavioral expectation questions and priming them on their elevator pitches, right? Tell me your story. Who are you? You have 30 seconds. Go. And today we have a panel of 4 interviewers who will sit down with the students 15 minutes at a time, interview them, and then give them professional feedback.
Very cool.
I just went to this women's mentorship, I don't even know, gathering, networking event. And Christine Sandman Stone, shout out to you. She was the one that was conducting it, and she talked a lot about resume building and telling your story. And that's why I was like, heck yes. So she says when you're building your resume, obviously you're listing your skills, but write what you're most proud of, through the lens of being proud of yourself. It's not I was responsible for customer relations. It's no, I built relationships with regulars, and coming from it from a stance of pride instead of just this is my skill set. It was just something that just clicked in my head, because she's like, yeah. And then when they ask you about it, it's something that you're so happy about and that you're ready to answer because it's really you. And it's not some disconnected resume of what you've accomplished.
Yeah, what you did as a person who labors, right? It's I love that you brought that up, because we talk about actionable words all the time, right? You didn't just seat people, you welcomed people in and gave them that experience. And I've noticed that when we get to that portion of resume writing where I really push the students, I'm like, yeah, you made this, but what were you responsible for? How did you contribute? I'm like, when you think of those actionables, you can take them with you. You are not a person that makes things. You are a welcoming person. You are a reliable person.
Yeah.
And that also changes the way that they think about themselves, right? Again, like they're not just this person coming into a space and just exchanging this labor. I mean, like, yes, because that's what work is, but also they can walk away and being like, I am a warm, welcoming person with, you know, and I just think that I've seen people, once they are able to talk, identify and talk about themselves that way, they carry themselves differently with that sense of pride.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's the moment, man.
And
That's
even,
the moment.
even like industry, I feel like a lot of people like in COVID and myself, there was a moment where I was like, I don't have any transferable skills. First, I didn't even like
Dude.
really understand what transferable skills were, but
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have any. And then like when you look at through those that lens of like, what are you proud of? Like, what did you contribute? And like it really does show like there are a lot of transferable skills that you're taking, and you're not. It's easy to just think that you worked for somebody and you weren't like a big part of it, but it's like restaurants can't run without their people.
They can't.
My mom used to always say that for every job, like when you're writing a resume, you're thinking about those things. You think about this, like the things that you gained, the skills that you gained, because there's like something that's preparing you for the next thing. And a lot of times it's the soft skills. It's the skills like communication that how do you, and maybe it doesn't show on paper, but it's something that shows in the interview and how you conduct yourself. But it's so true. Like I remember being like 22 and I was working in a school and working for an ice cream startup and being like, what are my transferable skills? Like I wanna be in a kitchen, and yet how is working in a school related at all? And then when I sat down and thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, I had to wear so many hats the day that I was the office manager and the nurse and all these things. Like I can multitask because of this job. I can, and I think that's something too that like maybe it's just a matter of perspective. And when you don't realize that and you don't think about those things, it's hard. It's hard to articulate, but also being able to name them, it empowers you.
Yeah.
It really does. And I think for, specifically myself, the gap between me doing entrepreneurship stuff and starting at Impact, and even a couple months into it, I suffered from a gigantic identity crisis because I got to the point where I was, talking to people about before I started Impact, different brick and mortar, traditional restaurant jobs. And it was that fighting feeling of like, I don't want to work for somebody else and help their dream and still get nothing. And at the same time, I did not yearn to open my own space because there are just levels of gambling I'm comfortable with. That is not, right? That takes a lot to be able to know yourself. And when you go into business, you go all in. You don't I mean,
Right.
you can't just half it and hope it works out.
Right.
You win, lose, or draw, baby. You go all in.
Right.
And for me, I was like, I can't go work in a regular restaurant. I can't stand behind the line. What can I do anymore? Can I do anything? Do I have this resume of like over decades worth of experience that is now futile? Like I had these moments where I was like, I don't think I can even go work in like an office. And what do I do if I'm not a chef? But then it took some time. I'm like you mentioned, you're like, you have the ability to communicate with people. You have the ability to stay organized and, prioritize. These are all kitchen things, but they all reflect in life, right? If you are a person that holds yourself to high standards, like nobody can teach that. You can hold that anywhere you go in anything that you do. So, that's something that I always try to instill in my students too. I'm like, these essential skills are just with you, whether you stay in the industry, whether you want to open your own business or work for somebody else, or you decide halfway through you want to be a marine biologist and this is your new path. All of those essential skills that you learned will still apply no matter where you go, and they can apply in your real life. You might have easier relationships if you know how to communicate and listen to people. You might have an easier time if you are punctual, that you put,
No, absolutely. I think so much of that is incredible to hear. I do want to kind of come back to Impact for a moment for people that don't know about it. There is no cost to these students, correct?
There is no cost to this program at all.
Right.
Everything is covered.
it is an incredible program. I mean, I was fortunate enough to see it with my own eyes, and Lorraine was kind enough to show Andy and myself a little tour of the space, and it is so cool, like to see the facility, like to see the like. There's so much put into the space and this program, and for what you guys are offering, I think it's it's such an incredible value and opportunity for a lot of people to really kind of harbor their like growth and their skills at such an early stage where people are just delicate. And like that's the first thing that came to mind is I was like looking at the room of all the students, and I'm like, man, like, you know, it's so easy for the like, let's just play the other story here. It's like they're 19 years old like you were at your age, and they go and like they get their foot in the door and they get a stage at an incredible restaurant, and then they just get they get hammered.
Oh yeah.
Right? They're like, kid, you don't have what it takes, you know, sorry. And you just like crush their spirit. Like, like this is a place and a space where it's like nurtured, you know, like I think of like a little baby chick being like, it's just like that you can delicately grow here without feeling the real life pressure of some assholes that work in like kitchens, you know, throughout the country and you know, in the world where it would just be like, it would just demoralize them at such a fragile state of their career where they're wanting to like learn how to do this. It's like, I want it bad. I just don't have the skills that it takes. And for them to like do that journey where they're like getting their, you know, chops in at a real place, but they could get absolutely annihilated. Like their, you know, their passion just completely put out, you know, and I love seeing what I saw at Impact, and you know that's part of like now like I just want to help there. Like I just want to like figure out ways to get involved.
Absolutely.
You know, it's such a cool program that I feel like a lot of people aren't aware of, and so excited to share about this. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think the environment that, you know, I'm very fortunate. I have a really great team. Like I could not emphasize how wonderful my team is and how grateful I am every day that I get to work with them. Like thoughtful people who are kind and really invested. The environment that Impact creates it's very realistic in the terms of expectations, right? I'm not teaching you anything that you won't hear from a chef out on the street, right? But what we offer them, kind of like you mentioned, is the ability to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think for young people can be really daunting, right? Especially too, you know, a lot of folks who, I think we hear this a lot, especially for our industry, is a lot of people who are not used to traditional schooling routes. You hear a lot of like, oh, I never like finished high school, or I was not a great student and I didn't think that this was something I could do. Right. But we do meet them and give supports where it's needed, while at the same time letting them know that this is not just like cooking boot camp. This is a 12-week long like job interview. Like how you show up for yourself shows, and how you show up for us, which shows us how you will be on internship, will then show you, you know, to different guest chefs that we have come in, your internship site, and you just continue that. So I think it's, for a lot of people, specifically with the demographic I work with, you know, it's always like an education or financial or social barrier that prevents them from ever going to culinary school. And then also it's understanding like which culinary school are you going to, and is this a program that, again, you know, the curriculum is like French centered, which means that it's very white male centered, right? Is that an environment where you can ask questions that you really mean to ask without feeling scared or nervous, right? Like, is the curriculum, is the food that you're making relevant to you and your experience, or are you cooking another person's food? and being told that that is the only way and the best way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I say that as somebody who went to culinary school. Like, you are taught the French way is the way. Anything else is wrong. And it took me a long time to unlearn that. Like, not proud of this feeling, but I remember after I went through culinary school, even though I didn't finish and I was working in fine dining restaurants, I would watch like my mom cook and I would be like, this is just not how you do it. And like, A, how fucking dare I?
Yeah.
In totality, like, this person is making food for us. How dare I challenge that? And B, why do I think that this is the only way to do something?
Yeah.
Right? Like, would I go see like a street vendor and think the same thing?
Right.
Right? At that point in time, maybe. But that's because that's what I was told was the only right way to do something. And if I didn't do it that way, it was wrong. You might as well throw it away, chef. Like, it's not even worth it.
Yeah.
And for our students, it's like teaching them, yes, there are technical terms and actions and cuts and ways of cooking that are French based, but that's only like one tool in your tool belt,
Right.
right? Like a person, like sauteing French way versus sauteing or like wok cooking
Right.
are different things. And there's nothing wrong with either of them.
Right.
And just because it's not French doesn't mean that person who's working wok is not doing a good job,
Right.
right? That's probably better than what you're actually sauteing. But I think that's a big part of our education too, being like culturally aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And, asking folks to stay curious. I don't know if there's a lot of room in a lot of, and, I haven't been back in school in a long time, so maybe that's changed. I hope it has. But in a lot of institutions to ask, like, why so much? Sometimes the answer to why, and you've worked in kitchens, you get it. And I think y'all too, sometimes the answer is because that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's how
Because
we
I
do
said
it.
so.
Because
Why are
I
you
said
even
so.
asking me?
Exactly. Like, that is like the
Why
only
are
thing
you talking?
But for us, it's like, okay, I want y'all to be curious because that's the most important question, not just
Yeah.
in work, but anywhere in life. Like, why do we do this?
Yeah.
Why this but not that? Why do we use this ingredient instead of this ingredient? Well, because due to this, environmental, maybe through like colonization, like this is what we use instead of this. Right.
Yeah.
And I really love what you're saying about curiosity, because I think so many places, regardless of whether it's this industry or another, they stamp out and kill curiosity, but so
yeah.
much creativity comes from curiosity.
Yeah.
And I mean curiosity too, like, well, this is how it was done. This is done in France or something, but
It's like a
what if we
militant.
don't? What if we
It's
don't?
style.
militant.
Well, and what if we don't have that here? Like, what
Yeah.
could we? It like, there's so much creativity in like, why could we not try this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do know what you're talking about. I think, and I was looking at culinary school programs for a while, and it is crazy that like the French section is like 3 semesters, and there's one day on all of Asia. You know, it's something
cuisines
like that.
of Asia. Like, just take all of Asia. We are making Asia food, right?
How much is culinary school these days, anyways? Just curious. Like, do we have ballpark?
It's not free.
20,000? Is that a safe number to
I have
assume?
no idea.
I mean, it depends. I don't know what Kendall is, but I know if you're looking at like
more.
CIA in Hyde Park or California, there's an accelerated program out in like Napa Valley, and that's supposed to be better because you get it done in a year, but it's still probably close to 50.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say.
It's wild.
40, 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I think having it in like 2007, 8, and 9, on average, like 5,000 per semester
Mm. Wow.
was what I remember seeing. That's
Yeah.
like just average.
No, I
a lot
love that whole part about like the words we can't get away from, right? Like Garmo, Julien.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be all these attachments
Mise en
to, French cooking.
Mm-hmm.
But like here, like we changed Garmo to Panchan, It's like
Panchan Station.
yeah, it's like Panchan Station
Oh.
instead of Garmager, right? Like,
Yes.
and just trying to like redefine what some of these terms are, like even in certain things, like I face challenges, like trying to think of like a Korean word for something that the Japanese have popularized. And like for like wabi sabi, most people understand that term right away, but that there's a term in Korean that was there, right? And we were just talking about hashiokis, and I'm like, we need a
What's a hashioki?
we need a hashioki.
The chopstick
It's a
holder.
chopstick holder.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's like there's no Korean word for this thing. They would just call it just that, right? I'm sure whatever a Korean mom would say, like, just put that down. But like, just like trying to like take these things and have a little bit of ownership on it, through our lens and through our perspective, and taking it maybe like, I don't know if taking it away from someone else is the idea.
Not yours, Japan.
Well, right, and just kind of like just like owning it and putting things into a new light,
Yeah. I think reclaiming it is something we can do. But I mean, I was thinking about this on the way here where I was like, I hate the idea of like authentic food, particularly because I feel like people don't ask that. Like, I don't know, you've been to Korea a couple of times, right? When you're over there, do people refer to like certain like Korean restaurants as like, this is authentic Korean food versus like, this is just food in Korea?
Right.
Right. And I think, again, like in America, there's like this obsession with like, what is authentic food? Which always for me, I'm like, okay, it's usually a person who's not related to my culture asking that question. So that's already kind of weird because you're insinuating that there's like lack of authenticity perhaps, or that I am the, delegate from Vietnam making this food.
The spokesperson.
The spokesperson, like I am, I am Vietnam now, making this. But it's also an interesting practice to think about when people, emigrated here and what was accessible to them and what they had to adapt to work with the ingredients and what they had. Like, I mean, now there's lots of specialty stores. You can order stuff online. You can really get a lot of ingredients. It's accessible. But think about like in the 70s. If you couldn't find something, for example, if you couldn't find those adorable green baby Thai eggplants, you're probably just going to try to use like regular purple eggplants for your recipe, right? You can't get this, so you use that. Does it make your dish less authentic?
Right.
I don't know. Because what is authenticity? I'm not bringing water from the well in the town that I'm working in and slaughtering my own cow. So what is the question of authenticity?
Well,
I think it's just a misused word of it's just we're not using that word correctly anymore, and it's been so popularized in a way. Like when I say the only thing that holds true as authentic is like this was made by Apple. Like that's an authentic MacBook Pro. Like Rolex made this watch. That's authentic.
That's
authentic.
right?
Not mine. I don't have one. Rolex, if you're listening. But like when it comes to food, it's such a fucking ridiculous idea that exists because it just, I don't know. It's like one of those things that we're always like frustrated.
It's a weird
with.
question. I want to ask them, like, what does that mean?
It's taking
What do you
something
mean?
that's so subjective and trying to make it something objective.
It
And
is.
in this sense that like what's authentic to me and like the kimchi my mom made is going to be different from the kimchi Thomas's mom made, and which is more authentic. Like at some point, and this is all over the world. I mean, I'm sure there's nonas in Italy that would say that someone's marinara is wrong. Things like that.
Down
like,
the street.
they would.
Not
and
even
100%. Like and
the
it's-
neighbors. Like,
and
that's all right.
I think it's interesting because I like the point that you brought up that it's usually someone who doesn't know the culture, because I think if you really knew, you would know that there isn't an authentic.
Right.
And I do think though we're in this time and place right now where being authentic to yourself can be such a thing. And that you see that in New York, you see that in the food world, but it is interesting because the notion is still out there that this isn't authentic. And at what point do you just have to kind of manifest something? Like how many parillas do there have to be for people to see that is authentic to a Korean American experience versus the Chosunok and the traditional experience that some people are used to? And the funny thing is when it's people who don't even know Korean food super well that are saying like something is traditional or not traditional.
Or they travel once. Like it's like that joke. It's like
I studied in Korea for 6
go
months.
somewhere once, and they're like that's not how they make in Korea. It's like that's how they made it in Korea in that one spot.
Yeah.
Like the spot
Right.
across the street has a different spice blend and different technique.
Right.
So maybe better for me to say is like when people ask about authenticity, maybe they're suggesting that I don't live up to their preconceived notion or stereotype of what something is.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, their problem, not mine.
Now I'm like waiting for somebody to ask me.
I know you're
So I
like
can-
you're on it, right?
I want to go back to impact because I have a few.
Yes.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
Okay. So what does it look like for somebody to get started?
Wonderful question. So, I'm guessing you're asking about requirements.
Yes.
Okay, so we are always interviewing and enrolling on a rolling basis. So we will constantly be accepting interviews, screenings. Some firm requirements for our program is that a young adult must be between the ages of 18 and 24. We've worked with people who are like 25 before, 26, but just based on like grant funding and stuff, we have to keep it at 24. And we prioritize BIPOC, we prioritize Black women, we prioritize people from the west side of Chicago all first. So students, I always tell folks when they are interviewing, my requirements for you entering this program is that you need to respect yourself, respect time. That's your time, my time, all of our time. And you have to be curious.
That's
a
awesome.
candidate who can meet all three of those, 99.9% of the time, go through the program in completion and succeed.
It's awesome.
But from our end, we really need no other commitments from them. So they really just go on the website, fill out an application. I screen them. If they meet all the requirements, they go into a first interview with me. They get interviewed a second time. Sometimes there's a third interview, but that's the whole process.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's easy.
That was awesome.
It is easy. It is easy. Sometimes the hardest thing, though, is making sure
Yeah.
people pick up their phones, which is like,
You're an adult now.
that's usually the first line of attrition that I have. People will make an interview or people will schedule an interview with me, and then I'll call, and then they just like no call, no show.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are all the no call, no showers right now?
Do you keep in touch with a lot of your? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you keep in touch with a lot of your former students, and do they keep in touch with the program and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we have a really great connection with our alumni. I think part of that is having, like smaller class numbers. You're able to get to know folks, get to know like them outside of the program and keep up with them. So I still do talk to any alumni that I have seen through the program. I've only been for like almost a year. I still reach out to quarterly, even just to ask them like, hey, how's your kid? Or like, hey, how is your time at Frontera going? Are you still there? What are you learning? Yeah. And then we invite alumni back for a lot of different events. So we have a student pop-up experience, which every cohort, we turn one of our spaces into a functioning restaurant. Students get to invite in their friends and family to eat this like 3-course lunch. And that's like their taste of like, this is how service works, right? Like, it's cute to put one endive leaf on the plate, but you have like 20, let's go.
Yeah.
So we invite alumni back for that. We have alumni who come support us for graduation, whether as, again, helping with the event or attending. And then we hold different like mixer events so that we can integrate like incoming students. It's always like, yeah, I can tell somebody something all day, but when they hear it from a peer, it means a lot more, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I can tell you something is great, but you might be like, well, you're just saying that because
Just trying to be nice.
you're just trying to be nice.
Still feels good, but
I'll accept it. But when someone who's gone through the program tells you, hey, this will be really challenging, but then this part is really gratifying. And, oh, yeah, that day is always like, the curveball day, and I was so nervous. So we try to have a good mix of alumni who come back, talk to our classes, work different events, so that we can stay in touch with them.
I love that, and I just want to mention for listeners, because people might be listening to this and be like, I've never heard of Impact. I've never even heard of the Hatchery. And they're like, yeah, what does this mean to me? And it's like, well, guess what? Like some of Impact students have and are cooking in some of your favorite restaurants that you don't even realize, right?
Yeah.
Like people that are listening, they're like, oh, I've been to Galit. It's like, guess what? Like they're a partner of Impact.
Yes.
And like they have students there, like in the restaurant, learning from Zach and his team. Like who hasn't been to Frontera that has lived in Chicago and has been a part of the dining scene? It's like their students are there. Like, and now I think there's like, that's like the immediate connector. Like, holy shit, that's so cool. Like I've literally gone and eaten at Galit. And so one of these Impact students have possibly been a part of my meal there. So that's real cool.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Everywhere.
We send them everywhere, guys.
they're all around. You'll never know.
I'd like to just, before you go
Yeah.
into that, I just wanted to circle back because you brought up the hatchery.
Yeah.
And because I'm here, I have to do.
And it's
the spiel.
amazing.
So the hatchery was founded in 2019. It is a joint venture between Allies for Community Business, which is a community microloan lender, and ICNC, which is the Industrial Council of Near West Chicago. The hatchery specifically is a food entrepreneur incubator, as opposed to our sister building, Make City, which is a more industry agnostic building. So in that building, you might have like coffee roastery, Corey Ice, photography studios, soap distillers. Whereas at the hatchery, every single person that works in that space is looking to build a food business. And that offers our students a really great opportunity because a lot of them want to be their own bosses, want to be entrepreneurs. So it's like, hey, finish Impact, go on internship. Ideally, they even get like another year of experience in restaurants because until you are actually in a functioning space, you don't understand every little part that goes into making that play happen.
Right.
Like you can still go through it and still be like, oh my God, I never thought of this. It's like, yeah, so because somebody else thought of it the entire time. But then we have students who are interested in starting their own businesses and they are able to, enroll in programs like Sprout, which is like an entrepreneurship building program that shares all sorts of resources from business to marketing to CPG, like consumer packaged goods. That helps people get onto shelves. Like somebody comes to you and they have a dream of they want to be in all the Whole Foods. Okay, how do we get you there? That's what our team is for. So we have a lot of resources within the hatchery for not just our students, but for community members from the west side of Chicago to do that. Things that they would normally do, like, if you wanted to sell something on our shelves and you needed to get a consult for that, you're like, oh, I don't want the sauce to separate. That could cost you a couple $1,000s just to sit down with a food scientist to do that, right? As opposed to us where we really work with our communities and we have different corporate sponsors who are able to work with people for either, as a sponsorship or for a fraction of the price.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My question, it was for Impact, but I think it could be for both. And it's, where do you see that? What part of the program do you see people struggle with the most, and which do you think is adding the most value?
That's a great question. Where I see people struggle the most is adapting to responsibility as a young person. Understanding that a lot of people who come into this program, they're young. They might have just graduated high school. They may not have any restaurant experience. And this might be their first time working ever.
Wow.
So things that you consider, right, that kind of becomes second nature. It's like, if my shift starts at 9, I have to be clocked in at 9. That means that I need to be somewhere at like 8:45 to change to be on the floor at 9. This is, how it is my responsibility to communicate with my manager that I'm running behind or that I'm sick or that something came up and I need some sort of accommodation. I think that is both the most valuable portion of our program and the hardest because we tell them all the time. And I'm not just saying this because I teach this portion. I would say it regardless. In this day and age, anybody can learn how to cut something. You can go on YouTube and get like 100 videos about learning how to julienne. You can go on YouTube and learn how to roast something, right? It's much harder to learn how to properly listen and work with your teammates. It's much harder to learn personal responsibility, right? And why that's important, not just to your team, but to you. So we say that kitchen skills will get you in the door. Essential skills are what keep you employed, help you advocate for yourself, and take you to the places in your career that you want to be.
I love that.
You can be a great cook or chef. If you can't work with people and nobody likes you, you cannot thrive, right? You can know how to put beautiful things on a plate that tastes incredible, but if you don't know how to talk to people and explain that to them, there's going to be much less people who are going to be able to try that.
Yeah, there's a disconnect.
That's
for
such a
sure.
beautiful, I love that message to like young working professionals getting into this, whatever business. It doesn't have to be this restaurant industry, right?
Yeah.
It's like the skill set gets you, I love that, like gets you in the door,
Yeah.
but how you hold yourself day to day, yourself and for others,
Yeah.
is what keeps you in the door. And I think that's such a powerful message to a lot of young people out there.
And also to business owners, I think it's easy to get somebody that comes in the door and they're green and they've never had a job and be like, God, they don't know anything. Instead, it's like, yeah, they don't know anything. They don't know to show up 15 to 30 minutes
Yeah.
before the shift. So I think that because we've been in it for so long, we can become jaded and not realize that like there's so many little moments and things
Yeah.
that they have no idea are going to happen. Like, oh, I'm late. Like, yeah, maybe I should call like that. They're just so stressed that they're late that they're not thinking like, actually my boss just wants me safe and they just need to know where I'm at.
Yeah. And I think for anyone that's listening, like I can tell you this from my experience and years of hiring and now like, you know, hiring for my own businesses, you know, like I will tell you, like, let's say you're a young industry and you're a member of this industry and you're like, man, like, I just don't know if I have the resume to get my foot in the door at some of these places. Like, and I know a lot of my colleagues that also own restaurants or manage their teams and hire. They share this same feeling with me, and I'll always take somebody that's green. And when I say green, so I'll always take somebody here that doesn't have the skill set and experience, but have like the enthusiasm, passion, and drive to want to learn and work hard over somebody that's got like a crazy built out resume. In fact, it's like a double-edged sword. Sometimes I like look at these heavy resumes and I'm like, oh, a lot of experience means there's going to be some baggage with this. There's going to be some unlearning from like the cultures that they were a part of. And sometimes it actually works against them. And you know, so my message to a lot of young people out there is like, just go and try, like, you know, and the skills will come, right? It's the effort that we're looking for.
The personal work.
The personal work, the integrity too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Somebody could be awesome on paper, but if they come through a space and they are not kind to other people, they move with no integrity, no one's going to want to work with you. You're not going to get the advancement that you're seeking.
Yeah, and I think that's what I admired so much when I was like walking through the space at both Impact and Hatchery, is there's it's really in line with like what I like to preach, which is not what you're learning, but why you learn it. And when I was walking through the space, there was just a lot of like things that I think maybe some people would take for granted, but like when I'm listening to like these programs and how it's set up, I'm just like, it's the fundamental stuff there that's building the foundation for people. And working in like a shared space, if you come through Impact and you want to now, you're like, hey, I've been doing a couple pop-ups, I really want to like learn how to like take this thing serious, and you want to sign up at the Hatchery, it's like we're learning how to like work in a shared space and like be mindful of others. It's now it's not your station. You don't own this. It's you're renting this station. You need to clean this station just the way you got it when you first arrived today. It needs to look that way. And I think there's like a lot of like building, like a lot of skills that are being built, you know, even been just working in that place. So
I'm going back to what you said about when you have them like reflect on their goals and what they learn. And I think that's so special because, you know, every restaurant does a review, but it's very like, how many times have you fucked up? And you know what I mean? And it's like, what do you think you need to work on? But they honestly, a lot of places, they don't really care. But if it's like more introspective, like what did you learn? What are you excited about? What are the goals? My question is what is the impact Culinary and the Hatchery doing with your experience in restaurants that you think restaurants should implement into their own for their staff?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Really good question.
I've already taken one of yours.
You're like
I
everything.
actually
Have
literally
you? What
wrote
did you
down
what did you take?
respect yourself, time and stay curious.
Stay curious.
I love those 3 rules.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's already going into our training manual. Like,
That's so funny.
There
'cause
better be a
I'll
from
be like,
Lorraine.
Lorraine
Don't
Nguyen.
be.
Yeah.
That actually
Copyright.
is in our handbook as well as in my graduation speech.
I love that.
I'm like, you have to move with integrity, intention. What's the last one? There's an I there. Anyways, I'll
Yeah.
Send me
Yeah,
those 3
well,
eyes
I'll
too.
send it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So the question is, what do I hope restaurants?
What do you think they should
What do I think they should
implement? Like just
implement?
knowing your background and maybe
Yeah.
some missing pieces.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think you brought up a good one, which was the check-in. And not just, yeah, we check in, like I see you on the floor. I'm like, hey, how was your weekend? It's good. But yeah, until something goes wrong or it's the yearly, managers are not sitting down with their staff and asking them what their aspirations are. And sometimes you might hear somebody say, I want to accomplish these things, right? And that's great because the more I know, the more I can help you get there. If you say that you're interested in managing one day, okay, maybe for me, if I were your, GM or immediate manager, I could find ways for you to get education so you can get there faster. Right? What are ways that I can support that? And maybe for other people, they're like, I just want to survive and, keep my housing and keep my family fed. Okay, what services can I connect you with? Do you need me
Yeah.
to, refer you to a community business organization that can help you with navigating housing? Do you need extra support to make sure that y'all have groceries? I think meeting the basic needs, something as simple as travel stipend would, and I know some companies offer this, but not every company. Think about that. If that's just one factor that people don't have to think about, people who are working hourly,
Right.
who are counting every hour they're here, who are not usually just not only providing for themselves. If that's one thing they didn't have to think about every month and knew that there was a way for them to get back and forth from home to work and back, that would be significant
Wow.
in the way that they were able to focus and perform. And that also makes them feel like a person.
Yeah.
I think that we all just forget that,
Yeah.
that they're, though we are here and we are a family and we are a part of this, we are all people
Yeah.
trying to make it happen. And the majority of us are here because we need to meet those basics. Something else I would, this was a very good question, actually. The restaurants can implement.
I like the sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I really love I feel like so much of what you're saying, Lorraine, it's pretty simple in some sense that like, there's just so much care.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like it's funny that the hospitality industry is all about serving your guests, obviously, but I almost feel like there's just as much care for a guest as there is your people and your employees and your staff, or just this sense of like taking care of your own, and like that extra step of care is taken considering basic needs, considering emotional needs, considering all of these things that maybe sometimes in industry we're too busy to think about. But I really love just everything you're saying. I think so much of it ties that piece in to young people being so moldable and just taking the time to care and nurture that. Like taking, just putting so much heart into that too.
Yeah.
Really love that.
Yeah, I love the check-in so much. I think that like with networking, what I learned is they teach you how to talk about yourself, how to advocate yourself, and also how to tell people what you want.
Yeah.
And it's also like the love language thing. It's like, I want to take care of you in the way that you want to be taken care of. And if I ask you, what are your goals? And your goals it's to make money and not to like move up in the ladder. And like having those conversations, it's like, perfect. I know my friend is actually doing a pop-up and he needs extra hands. And then I don't have to worry about like pushing you to move up in my ladder because that's not what you want.
Exactly.
So,
And I also think for young people, the
Yeah.
challenge to ask, what do you need? What do you want? Like sometimes you don't know. I mean, you don't have to be young to not know.
Yeah.
But just the sense of like, that introspective piece too of like, it's knowing what you need, but also then being able to communicate it. And I think for different people, it can be a struggle at either point.
Definitely. And I think too, people are just not comfortable stating their needs because either they've done it and it's fallen in a way where they don't feel heard. And sometimes you can tell somebody what you need, and unless it ties into the bigger picture of what they want you to do there, it might actually work against you. Like, think about how for so long, and I find this to be like not a healthy mindset, but it's like when you show up to work, you got to put 110 into this. Like, we all got to have the same goal of making this space the best it can possibly be. Yes, we can do that. And I have other life goals.
Yeah.
Right? Like, your dream is not my dream. And sometimes you would hear people react really badly to that. Well, if you're not going to put 110% into this, then don't be here.
Right.
We want people who are all in or all out.
Yeah.
But we are humans with different human goals, and we all come from different places. And you know what? That's what I would say for restaurants. You need to meet people where they need to be met, not where you want to meet them. Meet them exactly where they need to be met.
I love that.
How can people, help at, and build this, right? So like, let's say I'm listening to this episode and I'm just like, man, this sounds fucking awesome. And I have nothing to do with this industry. I just love going out to good restaurants. What are some other, like, what are all the ways that, like, I guess people can get involved here and help? Is there a fiscal kind of donation system that's set up for people that want to contribute? Donated foods. Like, I don't know what are ways that we can get involved. But even at the restaurant level, you and I have we've spoken about this. So. But I just want to share with listeners, like, if someone's like, this sounds awesome. How can I be a part of this?
Yeah. So for any listeners who are interested in supporting us, things like in-kind donations and sponsorships are huge, right? We are able to offer this program free of cost to all students because of in-kind donations and sponsorships. So something as simple as like, hey, I would like to sponsor one student for one cohort.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right? We've had people reach out and do that, and that's awesome. It's so great, and they're able to follow, like, this cycle through. They're like, hey, this is where this person started, and this is where they're working now. And every time I go into, Galit or Virtue, like, I know that person is thriving because they have this education that they so badly wanted. Other ways to support us is, we do, on top of having product for these classes, we feed these students 2 meals a day. So food and kind donations, again, that's one less thing for them to worry about. You don't have to worry about getting breakfast because you come here and we eat together. You have lunch together. Any sort of like donations in the form of food, as well as experience. That's a big one we've encountered in the last couple cohorts because, we have field trip experiences. We take students to different farms, different like markets, different restaurants.
Right.
Because we want them to see more of the world and understand that food is just so much more than being in the kitchen cooking. There are so many outlets, right? We've taken them to like porcelain showrooms.
Cool.
We've taken them to Northwest Cutlery, right? To help them understand their whole industry.
Right.
So having like an experience sponsor would be huge because for a lot of folks too, if you live centrally in Chicago, spaces like downtown are not that new for you. River North is not that new for you. West Loop is not that new for you. But if you live further out, that might be an environment that you've never been in before.
Right.
Right? Something like an upscale to fine dining restaurant might be something you've never experienced before. And in order to combat that kind of idea of like, cooks make really wonderful food and then like have nothing for themselves, I want you to experience those wonderful things so you understand. And I hope that like sparks something in you.
Yeah.
Right. Another way too is like, product. Like we provide full uniforms for students and every student gets a knife kit when they start.
That's so cool.
So any sort of sponsorships that people are interested in doing, feel free. I think y'all will have my info in a little bit, but they can reach out, whether it's cookbooks, you want to, donate a bunch of knife rolls, you want to, donate a bunch of non-slip shoes, right? And then just get the word out to your friends.
God, if
Yeah.
you like just
Amazing.
rallied every executive chef and general manager in Chicago, that's like, hey, go downstairs to your locker room and do a deep clean for all the
New
shoes
shoes.
that were just left
Unused
behind by
Yeah.
your
shoes.
crew. Like,
Yeah.
like you would have a plethora.
You'd be
Just-
able to give so much.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Something that we also, and this is whoever has the capacity to do it, but we love connecting students with professionals in the field. So if you are a professional in the field and you want to get involved in some way, right? That could look like being a guest speaker for a job readiness class,
Yeah.
where you talk about your career path and then students have an open forum Q&A and can pick your brain. We love that. You can also be someone who comes in with our chef team and does a demo,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it's like Flatfish Day and you're here to show a demo on breaking down like a whole halibut.
Right.
And students, again, get to pick your brain and ask you about how you got to where you were and how long, just any questions they might want to shake out before internship.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
I feel safe. Like hearing everything that you provide, like I feel safe and like taken care of. And that just like lets somebody feel comfortable to be creative.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my goal is really, yes, we teach them all these skills, both physical and essential, but I want people to be able to feel empowered to advocate for themselves,
Yeah.
whether it's in this industry, ideally, throughout their life. Like, I want to give you the skills to sit, reflect, ask yourself what you need, and then advocate for those things.
Well, we can't wait to get involved and help. So, and be a part of this.
absolutely.
So, super excited.
Yay, thanks.
Since we know you are well seasoned in where you've worked, we wanted to get your take on your favorite spots to eat in town.
My favorite spots to eat in town. Ooh. That's hard. I'm kind of like, I'm sort of reclusive these days.
You're like
'cause
home.
I'm tired. Home. Yeah, there's always food at home. Okay. Maybe I'll break it down into 3 sections. I'll do like an upscale one, a casual one, and then like a really quick one.
I like that.
That's awesome.
Okay. That pulls off a lot more pressure. I'll start from the top. I would say like fine dining, upscale dining. I'll come back to that.
Okay.
I would say mid-range casual. I really love Lula,
Yeah.
Virtue, Proxy. I think those are all really great spaces.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing really exciting food, as well as, people who, from knowing them for years and like working with them or working with someone adjacent to them, know that they're really invested in
Yeah.
people.
All that. Shout out to Jen Kim.
Shout out to Jen Kim, the OG, for quick service. I like Ruby's
Yeah.
on 18th. I liked it
Oh.
when
I've been there.
I liked it when they had the stand in
Yeah,
Maxwell.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I was actually used to going to. But Ruby's is one of those meals where and people ask me if I want to go out.
Do
to
they have a
places.
brick and mortar?
They have a brick and mortar now.
Oh my fucking
yeah.
god!
They just
oh my
they just won a
God.
Bonché.
Yeah.
What?
They just won a Bonché on Sunday.
Hell yeah, good
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, so
I thought you were talking about the Filipino restaurant at first. I was like, Ruby's
Ruby's
on Montrose.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Ruby's Tacos.
Yeah, Ruby's Tacos.
So
Incredible, everything. I mean, just so much care, love. So fucking good. And then fine dining. Shit, that's hard, you guys. I get kind of scared. I haven't gone out to a fine dining meal in Chicago in a while.
No pressure.
I feel the pressure.
while
Stop
we're
staring
waiting,
at me.
while we're waiting and staring.
Yeah.
Turn this way.
You know,
I can't even think. I'm like, where have I gone recently where it's like fine dining?
fine dining.
you
Yeah,
know?
that's hard. I feel like it's just not
Smith was great.
That was actually going to be top of my mind. Smith is. I've had multiple meals at Smith and really liked it.
It doesn't, and it also what John and Carrie do great is like it doesn't. You don't feel like, oh my God, I have to be like prim and proper here.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Quiet.
it's like it's done so well, but
Yeah.
it makes you feel comfortable, and that's like very contemporary. You know, I think that's like very
Yeah.
forward thinking in the level of food
Yeah.
and service that they provide. So it's really cool.
I feel like if we're removing the lens of traditional fine dining, but still talking about like a great service, a great thoughtful team, a great thoughtful menu, I would put Virtue up there.
Okay, absolutely. It's a
Because
beautiful space.
It's a beautiful space. I think the style of service is great. The food every time, like there are no misses ever. If we're trying to pull back that idea of like everything has to be tasting menu,
Right.
because if we're going off tasting menu only, then it's a little bit limited from my end.
Yeah.
It's not anybody else's fault. It's just my fault. Yeah.
Cool. I love that.
One question we always ask our guests, we think it's really important, is what would be advice you would want to share with your younger self?
I love this question. I love this question so much. Okay. If I had to share something with my younger self, I would tell her that it doesn't matter if other people like you. Some of these people don't even like themselves.
Wow, that was a good one.
Because I feel like, again, after everything we talked about, a lot of times when you're in spaces where you are feeling so othered, you feel like you have to conform to what it is that people want you to be. And if you don't always get to make the same mistakes as some of your white peers do. It's just a fact. And I felt like I walked on glass a lot and wanted to appease everybody and like be in good social standing and have the right people like me. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because the people who are real and around you see what it is that you do. You can work at the best place, but again, if you're like, an unreliable, rude person, that's just who you are. It doesn't matter what accolades you have behind you. So you should just stick to your values, right? Know yourself to know your values, and then just sit with that. It's fine. You're not going to make everybody happy. In a room full of 100 people, 100 people won't like you, no matter what you do.
I love that.
I love that too.
And just like to add to that, it's like there's so many other places you can go. Like just like this whole conversation is like taking me back to like my younger self coming up in this industry, just thinking about these students and thinking about where their mindset's at. And I remember like at a young age, I was like, these are the places I have to work.
Yes.
Like I was like, Union Square Hospitality Group is where I have to be. I have to end up. So how do I get to New York and do this? Or like in Chicago, I was like, the places like the Publican at the time, right? Blackbird, like these were places where I'm like, I have to work here.
Yeah.
But like, I think like what I would, like, I love that advice. It's like, if you go somewhere and they don't see you for who you are, maybe it's because they don't care to. And so go find somewhere where you can thrive, where they do see you, where you are valued and your hard work is appreciated.
Yeah.
And I think like this mindset of like, these are the checkbox restaurants that I need to work at for my resume. Instead of thinking like that, it's like, there are so many great places you can go and learn.
Yeah.
You can grow where there's leaders that actually give a fuck about you and like really do like put in their time and work for you.
Yeah.
So I love
Oh, I thought about it now. Integrity. Oh, fuck.
it. No, it was good. It was
Integrity, intensity, and intention.
intention. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
So everything you do it with all three of those. And you sit with it, and ultimately it should be like the decision you're most proud of. Right?
Yeah.
So there we go. Thank you for writing that.
I'm writing it down.
It's so fleeting.
I
That
love
moment.
that though. Yeah.
Um,
the 3 eyes.
The three
Three
eyes.
eyes.
But yeah,
Replacing the 3 A's in my life.
what are the 3 A's for you?
It's acknowledge,
Uh-huh.
apologize, and act.
Ooh, okay. I like that.
Yeah.
Do you always have to
Apologize.
apologize? We all fixated on a bullshit.
Like, ooh, that was.
Or is that
It
something?
is
It's
something
like
that I
being
l-
humble enough
that's
to
that's
do.
when
Something
you.
that I
That's when a
learned-
mistake happens.
Yes.
Though.
So I learned that
okay,
as like
okay.
how to deal with we made a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, and then in the front of house, and it's
Yeah.
like,
To a guest.
Okay,
To a
got
guest.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
It's a
so
more specific
It's
concept.
guest specific.
I
Okay.
like that.
but I could
for
use that. I mean,
that
yeah,
situation.
you can use that in life. Like
Yeah.
if I make a mistake, right? I'm
Yeah.
acknowledging, I'm apologizing for the mistake that I made, and I'm going to act on that in this way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go over where people can find you.
Okay.
On Instagram at Kansa Bakery, so CANSA Bakery, and then at Nimnim,
Nim Nim. Yep.
NEM.NEMM.
I'm waiting for whoever has nim.nim with only one M at the end to
Ooh.
relinquish that
Let it go.
handle.
We're
Let it
gonna
go.
write to them.
I
to
have
Instagram.
been sitting there for like 3 years.
Do they have any posts?
No.
They never do.
They're
never
just
do.
they're gonna
They
sell it.
never
That's
They're
what
gonna
these
sell
guys
it,
do.
and I don't want to
it.
buy it. It's just it seems silly to me, but as a person, it like the extra M bothers me.
It's crazy
Yeah,
how
it
like the
does.
.com
Yeah.
purchases, right?
Yeah.
And like you transfer to an at thing.
Uh-huh.
Like if you owned at Apple before Apple did,
Oh my god.
you got paid, right?
Yeah.
Like
Man.
Yeah.
people are buying Instagram, like yeah. it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Anyways, sorry.
And then they can go to these websites to support what you're doing at impactculinary.org and the hatcherychicago.org.
Yeah, please do check out. We have a lot of different events, not just for our entrepreneurs, but also different workshops for community members. And then during the summer, we actually host the Garfield Park Conservatory Council Farmers Markets.
Very cool.
So we have a lot of different folks. Yeah, the most, again, adorable, beautiful veggies. I like look at these tiny eggplants and I start weeping. I'm like, why are you so perfect?
The carrot.
Yeah, always back to the carrot. As well as, yeah, different vendors. And then, yeah, just, click like, subscribe.
Yes, absolutely.
Hell yeah.
We do have a gift from our sponsor,
Ooh.
Chio from Cocotel Collective.
Chio, thank you.
It looks so great. So this is made with Kyoto Pink Gin, which is a gin from Finland. It's made from
Awesome.
100% rye. Their
Awesome.
pink gin has lingonberry, strawberries, and rhubarb. So it actually has like a beautiful blush hue if you have the gin on its own.
Awesome.
It has a company Blue Doris liqueur, which is a floral liqueur with key botanicals orris root, which I've never heard of.
What is that?
Orris root, yeah.
We're
Pink
learning.
peppercorn and rose.
Love the pink pep.
I know. And then black sesame paste and then almond milk.
Hell yeah.
Shake, serve on the rocks, and garnish with a strawberry slice.
Yum. Will do.
It
I've
sounds
actually
so delicious.
It
I've
looks so
been-
good.
I've been fixating like in the morning instead of having just a smoothie now. I have like a misugaru,
Oh
like
yeah.
little coffee situation. I'll
my
put some
God.
black sesame in there. So I was like, how did you
Yum.
know?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So
That's
this
amazing.
is the boozy black sesame latte
I love
from
that.
Cocotel Collective. Thank you, Chio.
Yum. Thanks, Chio.
Well, Chicago is lucky to have you, and we're so excited to see where you take Impact in the future.
Thank you so much. I feel so privileged to know so many wonderful people and to continually meet new wonderful people. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yay!